you make your comments. Um, and I believe that Scott is not here. Is that correct?
Yes, we have Raphael helping us today.
Thank you. Welcome, Raphael. Unfortunately, Scott is under the weather today, and so I'm glad he's at home resting. But Raphael will be here, and presumably one of you in the CERM office will take notes on any editorial changes we talk about today.
Yes.
Great, super. All right. Well, it's been a busy last several weeks. Kim and I have had a number of meetings with folks from SRI.
George, we have to take the roll, I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you. Important detail. So let's take the roll.
All right. Mohammed Abu Salam.
Present.
Kim Barrett.
Present.
George Blumenthal.
Present.
Maria Bonneville.
Present.
Leandra Clark Harvey. Anne-Marie Douliege.
Present.
Fred Fisher. Judy Gasson.
Present.
Tom Bassiani.
Present.
Steve Julesgaard.
Present.
Panetta. Sorry, Joe, you on mute?
I didn't hear you. Sorry. Present.
Okay, thank you so much. We have quorum. Back to you, George.
Great, thank you. So it's been a busy last several weeks. We've had a number of meetings that have taken place. In particular, Kim and I met with a few people. Most notably, I think, was Randy Mills, who was a former president of CERM and, at least in my view, a really transformative president of CERM. And to get his advice on the search, which was extremely helpful. We've also had some meetings with SRI, and we worked with them to develop the documents that are in today's agenda that we will be discussing and potentially editing as well. So, but I think most importantly, now is an opportunity for us to begin as a committee, to begin to be acquainted with the SRI team that's assisting us on the search. So I'd like them to each introduce themselves. And Dan, can we start with you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, George. And thank you so much to the search committee for joining today. My name is Dan Perez. I'm based in Washington, D.C. I'm SRI's director for North America, and I'll be your lead point of contact for this whole search process. And I can turn things over to my colleague, Grace.
I'm pleasure to be here with you today. Grace Cohn. I am based in Denver, Colorado, and I'm a manager with SRI Executives Consulting Practice. So I will be around for the next few weeks as we finalize these initial documents, and then you'll be working most closely with Dan and Gabriella moving forward. So Gabriella, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Gabriela Berend. I'm a consultant at SRI, and I've been working for the past 13 years with searches for the pharma, biotech, and clinical research space. And I'm working together with Dan and Grace on this search. And last, I forgot to mention, I'm based in Buenos Aires.
Great. Thank you. Welcome. So we've worked with the SRI team, which I will invite to present material to us in just a moment. But we worked with them in developing two documents that are before us today, the executive brief and the candidate competency document. They've also continued to put together a timetable. And as our meetings here of the committee go forward this spring, Kim and I hope that at every meeting, we will present the timetable and where we stand on the timetable, and whether we're ahead of schedule or behind schedule or whatever. That timetable may be adjusted from month to month. But in any event, I will try to keep the timetable in mind at all times. And I would also point out that the SRI team also did a number of interviews themselves of something of the order of 25 stakeholders that included board members, members of the CERM team, former members of the board, researchers, and others, trying to get a better understanding of what CERM is and what the expectations for CERM might be. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan and let you go from here.
Great. Thank you so much, George. I think you've summarized things very well. I mean, we really appreciate all the fantastic input and participation from all of the participants in our stakeholder interviews. This was an incredibly important part of the process for us to understand CERM, understand, where the organization has been and where the organization is going. But also to really understand the role, what are the needs for the president at CERM, and what does the ideal candidate look like? And we've gotten some great input. We have then used that to update the executive brief, as well as build the competency profile. And just to clarify about where those documents come into the search process, the executive brief will be shared publicly as we go through the application, research, and identification process. Candidates will be seeing the executive brief at a very early stage as they start to understand the role and as they start to understand the organization. It has information about CERM or about the role as well as the application process. We'll be using that as the basis for our initial conversations with the candidates, where we go through their CV, get to understand them a little more, get to understand their initial qualifications. And then for the candidates that are then selected to move forward based off an initial review of their background, they'll then be receiving a copy of the competency profile. This is structured in a question and answer format, almost similar to a cover letter that they would submit. And it's really from the stakeholder interviews, it's what we've gathered are the most important questions that individuals on the search committee and on the board would like to hear from candidates. And so we asked them to fill that out, to provide a bit more detail, a bit more color from their backgrounds into that document. And then that becomes the basis for a more in-depth series of interviews where we dig into a candidate's leadership experience, their strategy experience, as well as get a little more information on their answers. We then use the results for that assessment and for that competency profile to then build the long list, which will then be presented later in the process. But when we do present the long list, it's important to know that you'll have a chance to see the candidates' CVs as well as their competency profiles. So you'll get a chance to see that additional detail and that additional information from the candidates themselves. So I can pause there for any quick questions just about the documents or about the process before we get into the language and the documents themselves. And we're also happy to answer any questions about the stakeholder interviews.
Any questions? Well, I will just remind the group that the process is going to be such that we will hopefully get a lot of interest in this position. And so we'll hopefully have a lot of names to go through. And the idea is that SRI plans to organize those files for us by at least identifying some. I don't remember their classification, but basically they will identify a group that they think are really prime candidates. They will identify a group that are possibly good candidates, but may have something that makes them less than prime candidates. And they will probably have a group of candidates that they feel don't meet our criteria. And it will be our job as a search committee to go through those lists. We can certainly pull people out of the B and C list if we want to put them on the long list, if that's what we wish to do. But we will have the responsibility of making those final decisions. And we'll have to talk, about how we will organize ourselves to do that, which I think is something we will do once we have a sense how many files we actually will have to go through. Doing that job with 15 applicants is a lot different than doing it with 1,500 applicants. So, so that's a decision we don't have to face quite yet. All right, but with that, maybe you'd like to start and start with one of the discussion items and present it to the board.
Oh,
George?
has her hand raised?
Oh, Kim, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Dan, since we are a search/recruitment committee in addition to assessment committee, and since we know the members of the committee are all well connected themselves, it's possible that they have people in their networks who might be interested in this position. How would they refer them to you to enter them into the process?
Thank you, Kim. That's a fantastic question. There are many ways that they can recommend or refer candidates depending on how well they know the candidate and how. So one would, of course, be we'd love all members of the committee to be sharing the role on their LinkedIn, and also, of course, share it via email with people that they're familiar with groups that they're familiar with, in order to make sure that it'll be getting a broad distribution. We'll also be doing that when we formally launch the search. They can reach out to candidates to share the role and encourage them to directly apply with SRI by submitting their CV on our, on the portal that we'll be setting up. And of course, if they want to, if there's somebody that is confidential or sensitive and they don't, a committee member would not like the person to know that they've been referred, they can provide that name to SRI, and SRI can just reach out to them to say, hey, we've identified you. We'd like to let you know about the role and see if you might be interested.
All right, thank you. Mohammed?
Thank you. A quick question. Is the search going to be confidential through the very end and selecting the one person? Okay, thank you. I'm good.
Other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, perhaps we should proceed then to the first document you want to share with us.
Yes, and would it be helpful for me to share my screen with the document, or if people have it in front of them, we can just go through it?
A share screen would be helpful, and we do have it on hand for backup in case anything fails on your end.
Great. Give me 1 second. All right, please let me know when you can see that.
We can see on our end. Thank you.
Great. So we have here the executive brief. As I mentioned, that this will be the public-facing document that we will be posting and sharing with candidates as they express their interest. It has a good amount of background information about the organization, about CIRM. We have included a message from the search committee, which was crafted by Scott, George, and Kim. And we, just to give a little more context about the role and about the organization. It goes through then more information about the mission, as well as some additional information that we've gathered from several documents, the strategic plan, the annual report, and others. It also includes some information about the governance. Given CIRM's unique governance structure, this will certainly be something that will be ensuring that candidates really understand going into the process. And then as well as the governance around transparency and the recording of and sharing of all the public information. And then we do get into, we do start with a lot of information about the organization, but of course, we want to make sure that candidates are fully prepared. We'll then be transitioning into information about the role. We first start with an overview of the document. Then we include a profile of of what the candidate should be bringing. and what kind of previous experience that they should have. And then we end with some information about the role location, as well as the terms of appointment, including the salary, which will be very important for this role. We then conclude with the application steps, and that includes the application deadline of March 29th, as well as the email address that people can express their interest in. We then have the steps of the interview process, as I described earlier, concluding with the information about the interview process with CIRM itself. We've kept that information a little more general at this stage, but that's something that as we get into the process with candidates, and especially as we get closer to the long list stage, we'll be sharing more direct information about what the interview process with CIRM looks like.
Great. So our task is to look at this document. I hope you've had a chance to read it before the meeting. It was on our website. The plan now is to take your suggestions. If there are edits you'd like to see, if there are changes you'd like to see made, or if there are questions you have, this is the time to raise it. The plan is that hopefully we will emerge from this meeting with a committee version of this document, and then bring it tomorrow to the full board for discussion by the entire ICOC board. So with that, let me turn to Steve Julesgaard.
Yeah, thank you, George. And this is more just a thought and a question for the subcommittee members here. So under profile, the second bullet point says, understanding of service mission and responsibilities as a state agency as outlined in Prop 14. And one of the things, at least for me, that I think is important is that an applicant would have previously attended a public meeting. Obviously, you could do that by Zoom, a public meeting of either an ICOC meeting or an application review subcommittee meeting, just to see how the organization operates. So I would suggest that we include that. Maybe we just tag it on the end here, Prop 14, including attendance at least one ICOC or ARS. ARS stands for Application Review Subcommittee meeting, so that they understand that's part of what they need to have done if they're going to apply. Just a thought.
I think it's a good suggestion. I mean, my general reaction is that's a really good idea for them to do, and they shouldn't even need us to tell them to do it, but I'm absolutely fine with including that here. I don't know how others feel.
Steve, do you think it needs to be a contemporary meeting, or would you find it acceptable that they go back and look at a previous meeting? Because we do have a link somewhere to previous board meetings.
Let me ask him, because I'm not as familiar with this. I know that there are transcripts of meetings, and I know there are minutes of meetings, but I don't know that there are ever any video recorded.
There are, Steve, on our YouTube channel. All of our meetings live there now. Over the course of the last few years, probably since COVID, our Zoom meetings are on our YouTube channel. So you can view yourself anytime you'd like, right there for you.
Thank you. No, thank you. But no, I think having at least, I think that sounds fine. At least just to get a sense of how we operate and kind of how things work at the level of the board, dealing with issues. So I think, look, I didn't realize that, Maria, that we had this YouTube possibility. It's scary, but
because I'm just worried that we not exclude people and keep things moving in a timely fashion.
Agreed.
If they weren't available for a specific meeting, so.
Agreed. I agree.
I think just including the link to the YouTube channel where people can find it, I think the easier we can make it for people to access the resource, the better. These are people that are presumably fully occupied in whatever their job is now. So my sense is that those meetings are the tip of the iceberg. So, the may be helpful to a certain extent, but there's a lot more that goes on that isn't really reflected in those board meetings. Those board meetings are often the outcome of processes that are going on in the background. So I think it's a good idea. I think we should provide them the link so that they can see it, but we ought not to expect that they come away with a great understanding of the organization in depth.
Dan, could you show in the document where that link is? I think it's in the section that talks about governance and the board.
Yes, we do have
Yeah,
a link
recordings
here,
and transcripts.
and we can certainly expand upon that and recommend that candidates review some of this and be familiar with it, leading into some of the conversations.
Yeah, just a sentence there. We encourage you to familiarize yourself.
Absolutely.
That's good. That addresses the issue, right? And I'm glad that that link is already there.
And provide the link or provide something that tells people where to find it.
That link is right there. If you click, well, obviously we can't click, but if you click on here,
Oh, I see.
it would take.
Okay, so found here is hyperlinked. Got it. I couldn't see that. Thanks.
Great. So, moving on, we have Mohammed and Joe. So Mohammed.
Yes, three quick items, and that box terms governance. I recommend, this person is going to be connected with the iCook board. I'd recommend you put a hyperlink where it says iCook that takes them to the website, and they see the board. So that's the first comment.
It's there, Mohammed.
I'm sorry.
It says more information about the governing board can be found here.
Oh, yes, I see it now. Okay, thank you for that. The second comment is I would prefer if the pages have page numbers on the document. And then the last comment is on page 2, the first paragraph on the right. Let's get there. Where you have Proposition 71, the hyperlink is missing. You have the hyperlink for Prop 14, but Prop 71 is missing the hyperlink.
Good job.
Great, thank you. We will definitely update all of those. We can add in the we can add in the link and then as well as page numbers very easily.
Thank you.
And I was laughing at your mention of page numbers, Mohammed, because that's something we discussed already and kind of went back and forth on. But I think it's a good idea and we'll do it.
Happy to do it.
Okay, Fred.
Yeah, I think on the last page that we were looking at before we started scrolling away, there's a bullet point that was talking about the process and how candidates will be notified of what happens. And then it said CIRM will likely issue an offer. Yeah, I think it's there. Yeah, so the third bullet, CIRM will likely extend a letter of intent to offer. It seems like that would be essential, not likely creates the possibility you may or may not. There's nobody doing anything without that. So I'm not sure why the word likely is there. If that means something, I'd like to know what it means. Otherwise, I think I would remove it.
Yeah, we're happy to make adjustments to make that clearer.
Was there any reason why that word was included originally?
A lot of this was more general language that we use in a lot of these job descriptions. And I think it just allows for some variation in different processes. But if you've all noticed it, then that's something that we can certainly edit and adjust.
Okay, I think that's a good idea. I think Fred's right. Other comments?
I guess the only thing about the likely is that even if you're the preferred final candidate and you've indicated that you won't likely won't be interested in the job. I don't think some would go through the process of extending a letter. But I agree that the wording can be fine-tuned.
George, Vito would like to comment.
Okay, Vito?
Hi, George. I'm sorry I can't get into the Zoom part of this, but I'd like to know other people's feelings. This is the second major paragraph of the document, the message from the CERM Search Committee. The opening paragraph, that's it, thank you. No, I'm sorry, the opening paragraph of this part, that you're going to come into a world-class infrastructure, best-in-class team, and a nearly $4 billion to deploy against some of the most vexing medical problems. I'm stumbling on the use of the actual number $4 billion because while it's factual, there's a lot of nuance. There's some of that money is pre-committed and will be for the maintenance of ongoing research projects and clinical projects. Some of it is already spoken for in our administrative costs, and some of it has already been spoken for, if you will, in our commitment to, as per Prop 14, to the developing the portfolio in the neurosciences part. So is everyone comfortable in using the number, or is there some pros alternative?
I'm very comfortable using that number. We talked about that a lot, Vito, internally in a couple of meetings recently, and decided that the 4 billion was the number to use because as we undergo prioritization, I'm sorry. I think someone was talking. I'm not sure though. Anyway, I think the number I'm comfortable with that number. And in reference to the 1.5 billion in neuro, that's an ongoing process where we will be making decisions. It's not a foregone conclusion how we will spend that 1.5 billion, except that it will be placed towards neuro. So I think that's flexible.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's a fair question to raise, but you know, the number that we will have to spend is going to be of the order of 4 billion in any case. And it does, you know, putting a number there does make it much more appealing.
Much more what, George?
Appealing as a job. The whole point of this message was to show what an exciting opportunity this position was and to really excite the interest of potential candidates.
And I would add that even if some of it is earmarked for neuro, that is still some of today's most vexing medical problems. And even the part of the budget that is directed towards administration of the agency, that is in service of fighting against some of today's most vexing problems. So I don't feel that this is dishonest. I think it does show the scale of the agency. And I think I agree with George, that's very important.
Other comments or questions? So, Raphael, do we need to have a formal approval by the committee?
Oh, sorry. Yes, you do, George. So if someone could make a motion and second it.
Okay.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
And just to summarize, this is to approve the executive brief presented by SRI here with any changes that here.
Great.
Fred Fisher seconds.
Thank you, Fred. Okay. Is there any further discussion? Is there any public comment?
There are no hands raised.
Okay. So I think we can proceed to a vote.
Okay. Mohammed Abusalam,
Yes.
Kim Barrett,
Aye.
George Blumenthal,
Yes.
Maria Bonner,
Yes.
Anne Marie Deliege,
Yes.
Fred Fisher,
Yes.
Lee Gasson,
Yes.
Viton Bassiani,
Yes.
Steve Julesgard,
Yes.
Joe Panetta.
Joe, you're on mute.
Okay, the motion does carry.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we will make these changes, or someone will make I think someone will make the changes to this document and post it this evening. So it will be posted prior to tomorrow's ICOC meeting, and the document that we share at the ICOC meeting will be the updated document as approved by this committee.
Yes, George, we should be able to turn it around very quickly after the close of this meeting and
Great.
send around the updated version.
Super. Okay, shall we move on to the next document?
Fred has his hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fred.
Well, if someone, so I'm not a master of LinkedIn, and is there someone that can prepare the post that we should be posting to make it easy to copy and paste into a place on LinkedIn where we can make messages like this and maybe provide a little instruction?
Yes. Yeah, Fred, we're happy to put something together for when we're ready to launch about summarizing what I discussed earlier around referrals and how you can reach out to people, how you can put them in touch with SRI. And in that, we can definitely include some suggested language for posting on LinkedIn and via email.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
And Dan, will you share that with the full committee, or actually maybe we want to share it with the entire board?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Okay, seeing no other hands, why don't you move forward? Dan.
Great. All right. One second, I will now share the competency profile. Please let me know when you can see that. And please know that this is the view version. I can change it. This is what I personally use, but
Can you blow it up a little bit?
yes, of course.
Thanks.
So this is the competency profile. As we mentioned, this will be shared with candidates who will be advancing in the process after meeting the initial requirements for the role. This is to gather additional information, to gather more context from them. We start with just some basic biographical questions. Then we get into a series of 8 questions that we ask them to complete. We ask them to keep the answers short and to the point. And it's really a chance for candidates to give a lot more detail about their experience. We tend to see in our search processes that resumes and CVs can be very high level. They can have just very short bullet points to encompass a good amount of experience. And so this is a chance for a candidate to really go into more detail, provide some more color to experience that they feel is most relevant, but also allowing a chance to showcase to the search committee about their motivation, about their expertise in this space, and about what they could really bring to the role. And so they have a chance to complete these questions, and then we have at the very end just some short additional biographical information, and then as well as just logistical questions just to verify about the location, about their notice period, and about their alignment with the salary. As we always like to be as upfront and transparent as possible when it comes to things around salary and relocation. And so we will be covering that with candidates during the screening phase, but of course it's just a good reminder.
Great, thank you. So
we
we can now open it up for discussion, and Kim has her hand raised.
I just saw a little typo in question 3. The last line, it should be aligns with SERM's mission.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Mohammed?
Thank you. I have three points to make. One is there's an extra blank page. I don't know if that's intentional. I'm sure you've noticed it.
At the very end here?
Before the last, yeah, second to last, at least in the version that I have here. So anyways, you can.
Okay, we'll adjust that. Yep.
Yeah. Second one is, so not everyone will agree with these two comments, okay? One of them is when I read the salutation and we only put the example as doctor and professor, and the description of the job says that a doctorate is preferred, not required, it kind of makes the person think twice when they see this. It's almost like we're saying these are the only options. I know it's example, it says example. This is at the very top salutation. So I would recommend adding other things, Mr., Ms., or something, just to show there's a variety and not to discourage people. And the last comment, and I don't mean any disrespect to European English, but this is an American organization and we want to give the message that this is for an organization in America. I think the English should be Americanized, not just the spelling, the S and the Z, but also forename, typically it's first name, those kinds of things. Again, you want to make sure that this is established in America. Just the character of the organization is important. Thank you.
Of course, we're happy to make those changes.
I think those are great comments. And, from a DEI perspective, the salutations become much more complicated because a person might not identify in a traditional, gender specific role. So we ought to be sensitive to that and have that framed in a way that is completely inclusive.
I think I seeing broad nodding of heads. So Mohammed, your suggestions weren't as controversial as you wanted to suggest. So I think we can adopt all 3 of them. Kim?
Yeah, Dan, I'd like your guidance on this. This is designed as a global search. There is a box, I think, on the first page where it indicates whether you have whether you're eligible to work in the United States. I wonder if that would dissuade people from applying and whether there should be some context there that says, some will work with candidate to, make immigration arrangements if necessary or whatever. Because I would worry if that was one of the first questions that I was asked and I said no, that I would immediately be disqualified. So maybe we just need a little nuance there, because there are some very good people working in this area worldwide, and that's what we said from the get-go, that it was going to be global.
Absolutely. And no, it's a good point. We can add in a little notation about that. We will be during the initial phases in the executive brief, we do mention that, relocation and visa support is provided. And then that's something we'll also be discussing with candidates during the screening process. But we can certainly continue that here as well. So happy to make that adjustment.
Great. Other comments?
I'll just say for the purpose of the committee that I really like this process because it will give us a much more organized way to review what would otherwise be cover letters that might sort of range randomly over a variety of topics and might leave some important things left unsaid. So this I think will be a great tool for not only for SRI, but for the search committee as well.
Thank you. And just to provide some additional context as well, it's our goal that during when we get to the long list phase, that we will actually be evaluating candidates along these competencies and really try to rank them in kind of a high, medium, and low assessment. And so then when you see our full long list, you'll have a chance to see, which candidates are highest, say, in strategic planning, which gave the best examples, which, through our assessment were really the strongest, which had, and then also which had the most experience in complex governance structures. Because, what we typically see in these search processes is that, candidates will bring a mix of skills and experiences. And so you may not see somebody who is high or, high across the board, but will have trade-offs based on their background.
Great. Thank you. Steve?
Yes, Dan, you mentioned relocation support. I think it's a good idea that you have a good understanding of what relocation support we can provide, since we're governed by some California rules and regulations in that regard, being a state agency. So just make sure you've vetted that with Scott Tosher or Raphael or whoever from our side. And I think I've mentioned this to you before, but one of the big issues for anybody outside of the state of California, because we're going to want them here in the state, is the extremely high cost of housing in the Bay Area. It's true in Southern California as well. So it could be a bit of impediment for people coming from other areas who want to comment a similar housing situation to the one they're leaving, and find it difficult to find one that's affordable here in California. So when we have these discussions with them, I just think it's just to have that on the table, that, what our expectations are and what some of the hurdles might be that, in getting there.
No, absolutely. I think it's something that we're going to be raising with candidates very early on. And we'll be, as we get feedback from candidates during our outreach, we'll be able to determine if we're, say, getting a lot of declines of interest because of the salary or the relocation issue. And then we'll be able to certainly adjust during the process. But I'm fairly confident that, given my experience in recruiting within California, that while it is certainly a very high cost of living, that for the right candidate who's very interested in this role, that they will certainly make allowances and have an understanding that they'll need to kind of move and relocate. And I do think the salary is very fair in the marketplace as well.
Great. Other comments, questions? Well, I have a couple of quick questions. First, I just want to be assured that the space that's left for answers on these forms is expandable. Is that the case? I just want to make absolutely certain of that.
Yes.
Okay, because
yeah, it's a Word document, so it'll expand out as they write.
Okay, so it will be a Word document as they get
yes.
it. That's nice. Too bad you can't impose an upper limit, but that's another story. The other thing is, we had talked about including in the first page a question about listing your awards and honors. I don't think it made it into this version. Were we going to do that?
It is there. We did include it down at the bottom with some of the other areas here.
Oh,
happy to move it upwards.
I had thought on the first page, but as long as it's there, that's what I care about. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
To get back to Mohammed's previous point, I think in the US, it would be more likely to say, are you willing to locate, rather than are you okay to relocate? But of course, I'm not the best judge of this, since I didn't grow up in America.
Okay, so my understanding is the changes we talked about today will be incorporated again in this document this evening.
Correct.
So that it can be posted. in advance of tomorrow morning's ICOC meeting. So can I have a motion to approve?
I'll move.
Thank
I
you.
second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve this document. Is there any discussion? Is there any public comment?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, I think we can proceed to a vote.
Mohammed Abu Salam,
Yes.
Kim Barrett,
Aye.
George Blumenthal,
Yes,
Maria Bonneville,
Yes.
Anne-Marie Duliege,
Yes.
Fred Fisher,
Yes.
Gasson,
Yes.
Vito Imbasiani,
Yes.
Steve Julesgaard,
Yes.
Al Panetta.
Yes.
The motion carries. Thank you.
great, super. Okay, so Dan, proceed.
Great. Well, I think our last step is to just quickly review the timeline, just so you're all aware of kind of our general timeline right now. We are currently planning to launch the search on March 1st. And as I mentioned, that will be when we will post the role openly, that we will start to accept applications. And given the question earlier, at that, the day or two prior, I'll share a summary for the board members for how to distribute that message, post it on LinkedIn or share via email within their networks. We will then, our application process will be, our application period will be for 4 weeks, during which we will be accepting applications as well as screening and contacting candidates. After the application closes, we will have 2 additional weeks for the assessment process and the vetting. And that process will be ongoing during the application period, but that just gives us a little extra time because we tend to see a surge of applicants at the closing date. And then we will be submitting the long list currently on April 12th. If there's needs to be a slight extension due to scheduling with a number of candidates, we will certainly let you know. From our side, we typically don't see any concerns about meeting this timeline. What we do find, though, is that candidates especially candidates at this level for this type of role, will be quite engaged in their current roles, will be quite busy, might be difficult to schedule with, and take the time to complete the competency profile. So if we do see a response from people saying, hey, I'm interested, but I need more time to complete the materials and schedule time for our interviews, we will let you know. And then during this process, we will be checking in on a weekly basis via email with Kim, Scott, and George, and just to let them know about any feedback that we're getting, any questions that are coming up that we haven't gotten answers to, as well as just overall progress. And then at the 3-week mark, we will be having a telephone check-in with them just to let them, give them a sense of how the candidate pool is developing and the overall feedback that we're getting.
So Dan, let me ask you, will we still, in the current plan, will we still be accepting applications after the 30-day open period ends?
We typically try not to. We try to be very clear to people about the application deadline. And the big reason for that is to give people a quote unquote burning platform that, to say that this process is on, does have a deadline and we do need to complete the application process by that time so that people know whether to bring up their interest or to not.
Okay. Steve has a question.
Yes.
George, I'm going to echo what you just asked about and suggest that we perhaps have a little more flexibility on the end date in certain situations. What we want to do is recruit the best possible person, right? And there may be circumstances in which they simply can't meet that. I mean, we're talking about people that can be very, very busy, but very, very interested. Mm-hmm. And to just simply say, I'm sorry, it's now March 30th, one day later, and we're just not going to accept it, strikes me as just a little bit too authoritarian. So I would just ask us to be a little bit flexible about the end date.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, we can certainly, if necessary, extend the application deadline a bit. And I think what we probably ask candidates to do is just, if you're interested, just to send us a note saying that they are formally interested. We're not expecting them to have completed the application process by the whole interview and assessment process by that date, but just to express initial interest. And we typically rarely see an issue with just the simple expression of interest. But yeah, if there's somebody who is has needs to get us their materials and is a day or two late, we'll of course be flexible in that sense.
Thank you.
Judy?
Thanks. Similar to what Steve was saying, this is a incredibly important position, and it's absolutely imperative that we get the best possible person for the position. So personally, I'm less concerned about the timeline and more concerned about making sure that we get the best applicant pool that we possibly can, and then from that get the best long list, short list, and the best candidate. I think in my own experience, I think June is pretty unrealistic, but anyway, that was my thought.
No, thank you, Judy. And we're going to be doing everything we can to make sure that the process proceeds on a very timely basis. We're going to be trying to schedule things as far as possible out ahead of time to make sure that and to try to align calendars as much as possible. And so, because we find that the scheduling, especially when we get to the interviews with the search committee and with the board, are in most of our search processes the biggest delay, but we can certainly work on people's schedules on that ahead of time. And no, I mean, we are doing everything possible already to gather and really build a strong candidate pool. We have team members that are part of this search process. That includes Gabriella and also other team members that couldn't join today that have been working in the background while we've been doing the stakeholder interviews to already build a talent pool, and partly guided by the great referrals and suggestions that we gathered during the stakeholder interview process. And we currently have around 200 candidates that we would be reaching out to on day one. And both as candidates, but also just as importantly as sources of referrals for people to help spread the word. And so we are going to be doing everything we can to spread the word about the role, to attract a great candidate, and then of course to get you to narrow that pool down into the best possible candidates.
Good, very useful.
Great, super. Fred?
Yeah, I think I'm having a similar reaction, and I'm assuming that, which you just validated my assumption, that this person is going to not identify themselves through seeing the ad on LinkedIn, that this is somebody you're going to identify through your outreach because you see someone in the field that would be a good fit for this position, at least initially. So you do this for a living, so I'm assuming the 4-week time frame is something that, in your experience, gives you sufficient time to be beating the bushes to find the person, which I think is how it's going to go, versus the person sort of seeing an online ad somewhere, because they're probably not necessarily in an active search themselves. So if you think 4 weeks is enough for you to uncover every rock and tree stump there is, great. I think that's sort of my reaction to it, and I'll take your word for it that that's sufficient time for you and your team to be doing what you do to find people, versus them sort of finding us.
Mhm.
So
Oh, no, no, absolutely.
flexibility around that is, I understand the need for a deadline, and I also support the need for some flexibility in terms of, you know, once you get through the candidate pool and you don't find someone, or you may want more time to enrich the pool, because you're not getting the exact right person anyway, because we're not going to be slogging through 200 resumes, I'm assuming. You know, I think what you're probably hearing is that some flexibility around that deadline to ensure that you are able to do what you do to find the right person, and that you have sufficient time to do that.
No, absolutely. No, thank you, Fred. And just a couple of points in response. I mean, one is that we will certainly be in very close touch around what we're seeing and as terms of a response from the market. And if we feel like that we need more time to build that talent pool, we can certainly extend the process a little bit, and to ensure, because to be honest, until we feel like we're satisfied in the search in the candidate pool for the long list, we will keep going, and we will keep looking for great candidates, and we will keep reaching out to people. We do feel very confident at this stage, given that we've had some time these last few weeks while we've been doing the stakeholder interviews to do some research into the space and gather a good initial list of candidates. And so we do feel like we'll be in a good place when we launch on the 1st to really advertise the role and to get the word out there. And to your point, yeah, I've been doing executive search for nearly 10 years now. And I think if I had to say an amount, it'd probably be 1 out of 10 roles I've done has been completed by an applicant that saw the role on LinkedIn and applied. Most of the time, the successful candidate they're very heads down, they're very busy in their current role, and they need that tap on the shoulder to let them know this opportunity is available, either by us or through somebody that refers them to the role. And so we typically find that those are the best candidates that come through our process. And so we'll be looking through all those different avenues to find that best candidate. And then to your point, we of course do not intend for you all to be going through 200 CVs. Our goal is to get that down to a manageable number for you to review and to really we'll be showing our work at that stage and show you why we differentiated candidates in a separate way and what separated those candidates who made the long list and those who didn't. And so, you know, and that's why we're going through this very thorough process, which with all these different steps to make sure that we're making that overall decision process at the long list phase as easy for you as possible.
Great. Vito, I believe you have your hand up.
Thanks. Another item that relates to the timeline that hasn't risen yet. I'm not an expert in world religions, but the month of March, since we're announcing at the beginning of March and closing at the end, but for both Catholics and Orthodox, Easter is looming. Ramadan falls in the middle of that. And not that the religious holidays guide us, but families might have baked in long vacations with their children. And if we have an applicant in New Zealand, relatively incommunicado, I still think Judy's warning that, you know, and I agree with it, that we should be looking at the quality. So will it be sufficient for you just to have them put a place marker in and they say, as soon as we get back, you'll get everything else?
Absolutely. And we certainly see that when we do searches around the Christmas holiday and around, you know, the summer holiday period as well, that candidates will get back to us and say, hey, I'm interested, but I need, you know, I'm on vacation the next week or two, and I will get back to you with my materials. And, you know, as I said, for those right candidates, if they say that they're on vacation or they're out of touch, then we can certainly be flexible on the overall deadline to give them a chance.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kim?
Yeah, just to build on what Fred said, it's not even just that the people have their heads down and are not looking at listings on LinkedIn. I think even if they see the listing, the sort of people that we want to attract probably need to be encouraged to apply. They won't apply unless they're invited to do so, but I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that, Dan. And then the other thing that I think we definitely must keep in mind, and of course we'll be doing this by monitoring the pool as it accumulates, but we need more than one strongly viable candidate, because we've all been in this position of searches where we think we have the best person for the role, and for whatever reason, at the end of the day, it doesn't work out. They finally go online and look at the price of houses in the Bay Area, or their spouse says, no, I'm not moving under any circumstances, or something comes up. So I think we need to have at least a few truly viable candidates to make sure that we can close the deal.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. If as I said earlier, we won't be going forward to the long list phase unless we feel like we have a very strong pool of appointable candidates that are ready for you. And if we do need more time to gather that list, we will let you know and keep going. But we certainly won't go forward unless we feel like we're ready and that there's a great number of appointable candidates there. And we hope to leave you with a good problem, which is just choosing between the who's the best.
Great. Steve?
Yeah, something that Kim just said sort of triggered a memory of mine, which has to do with my past life with bringing candidates in from other parts of the country to try and hire them in California. And oftentimes it required a visit to the area, particularly if, let's say, they're coming from North Carolina or some other part of the world. And it's a trip usually of both of the partners that are involved in order to see if this is really where they want to live. And I can imagine that same thing could pop up here. So we just need to think about how we might have to integrate this into the process as we go along, of basically allowing people to make a trip to the Bay Area to say, yeah, this is a place we'd be happy to settle or not, and potentially paying for them to be able to make that assessment.
Thank you. Good point.
Thank you. I'll definitely note that.
Other comments? I'd also note that one of the things that we're going to have to do at some point is schedule a series of interviews for essentially a long list. And that's going to take a fair amount of time without, those interviews will take, perhaps, I'm just guessing, through at least 3 full days of time set aside to do those interviews. And all of us are busy. So what we will do is, once we get to the point where we are confident that we have a candidate pool that we're comfortable with, we will start to find dates to schedule those interviews. And I know it's going to be a pain to find 3 full days in your schedule to do those, but I really am going to encourage at that point all of you to be as flexible as you possibly can be. We aren't scheduling them yet because we're not yet certain when this is going to be. But as soon as we have that level of certainty, we will proceed to do that as quickly as we can. I know for the staff, that's going to be a major headache.
George, I'm rather inclined that we might at least try and get some holds on people's calendars, even if we don't know exactly the parameters of what we need at this point. Because the closer we get, the harder it gets to schedule. And if we wait till we start seeing what the pool looks like, we've got a target of when we think these will be.
So that actually makes sense. We can certainly try to put some holds, and on the assumption that we're successful and stick to the timeline, I think that's probably a very good idea. So we will be contacting you in the relatively near future to do that. But I just want to say that's going to be the major time sink in terms of service on this committee. And I just want you to be aware of that.
Absolutely. Thank you, George. And I was actually talking with Maria earlier today, and I was messaging with Scott last week just about this exact question and about what does the process look like post the long list, and about how CIRM has done these interviews in the past, and and our recommendations for these kinds of interview processes. And so we'll be certainly sharing more. We're still kind of gathering some information, but we'll certainly be sharing some information with folks soon about that.
Great. Excellent. Well, I think that may take us to the end of our agenda, unless somebody has anything else they would like to raise at this point. Grace.
Just in terms of getting documents back, recognizing that Scott has been our point person and that he's out. Raphael, are you the right person to get in touch with this evening to make sure that documents get posted ahead of the meeting tomorrow?
For me and Claudette would be great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I believe I need to ask for any additional public comments.
There are no hands raised.
Okay. So if there is no further business, I believe it's appropriate to adjourn and give everyone back almost a full hour of their lives.
Thank you, George.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thanks
you.
everybody.
Thank
Great.
you, everybody,
Thank
for
you.
all your great comments and questions. We really appreciate it.